Quantum Consciousness, Chapter 1, A Treatise on the Obliteration of the Sad Animal. The problem is the spine. This vertical assertion, this bony ladder of self, creates the fundamental lie of separation. It hoists the wet feeling meat of the brain into a lonely tower from which it mistakenly declares itself I. This I is a fossil, a calcified record of every wound, every disappointment, every minor chemical betrayal in the slow, sad chemistry of the body. It is a fortress built from sorrow, and its only language is a silent, internal scream for maintenance. The therapies of the old world were mere palace intrigues within this fortress. They rearranged the furniture of memory, polished the rust from certain behaviors, or most crudely attempted to adjust the atmospheric pressure within the skull by dumping synthetic emotional regulators into the blood. These were attempts to make the prison more comfortable. They were a plea for better decorations on the walls of a cell that was itself the disease. Quantum consciousness is not therapy. It is a deliberate and violent meteor strike aimed at the fossil. It is a methodology for the dissolution of the spine's lie. The first phase is sensory alchemy. The subject is immersed in an environment of controlled, paradoxical input. Light does not illuminate, it has weight and texture, a thick amber substance that presses against the skin. Sound is not heard, it is ingested. Low-frequency vibrations become a dark syrup poured into the inner ear, traveling down the jawbone to pool in the stomach. High-frequency tones are not notes but needles, stitching the air itself into new and temporary shapes. The goal is to overwhelm the traditional five sentinels, to force them into a mutiny against the brain that commands them. The eyes begin to taste, the tongue begins to see, the skin develops a kind of deafening sight. This synesthetic riot is the first crack in the ego's carapace. The core of the process is the introduction of non-Euclidean emotion. The subject is guided to generate feelings that have no correlative in the natural world. The aim is not to feel love or fear, but to feel the emotional equivalent of a Klein bottle, a surface that contains itself in a continuous paradoxical loop, or to generate the sentiment of a hypercube unfolding in four-dimensional space, a sensation of becoming immense and intricate, in directions that have no name. It is the mind fucking itself into a new shape. It is a psychic autoeroticism of such profound and violent creativity that the old, brittle structures of the self cannot withstand the pressure. The participant learns to orgasm without touch, achieving a climax that is not a release but an explosion of perceptual boundaries. It is the feeling of a scream turning inside out and becoming a universe. As the fortress of I crumbles, a new state of being precipitates. This is the liquid state. Here, thought is not a linear sentence, but a colloidal suspension of potential. Memories are not recalled. They are suspended in the medium of the present, available for touch and reconfiguration. The individual is no longer a discrete entity, but a temporary eddy in the flow of a universal, sentient plasma. This is the replacement for all pharmaceuticals. Why would one need a chemical to balance the moods of a single lonely point when that point has now become the ocean? Depression was the isolation of the eddy. Anxiety was its fear of rejoining the current. In the liquid state, these are not solved. They are rendered meaningless. The soul, unmoored, now experiences the ultimate exotic union, the great attachment. It is not a connection to God. It is the realization that one is a specialized organ within the body of a cosmos that is itself alive and aware. Your sadness was never yours. It was a fluctuation in the cosmic blood. Your joy was a solar flare on the surface of a star that is your true heart. The process is complete when the subject achieves a state of continuous, silent, and ecstatic participation in this vast, living entity. They are both the lover and the loved, the wound and the healing, the question and the answer, a single, perfect, and unbearably beautiful syllable held in the mouth of forever. The sad animal is dead. Long live the universe. Chapter 2. A Treatise on the Aftermath of Unity. The aftermath of the great attachment is not silence. It is a new and more complex noise. The dissolution of the spine's lie does not result in a void, but in the revelation of a substrata, a psychic geology previously compressed beneath the weight of I. This is the landscape of the unmoored. What remains is not a soul, but a site, a location where the weather of the cosmos passes through without obstruction. The memories of the former individual are not erased. They have become fossils in this new soil, their emotional contours now serving as riverbeds for external pressures to flow through. A childhood fear becomes a narrow canyon where solar winds whistle with a particular ancient sorrow. A moment of past joy is a broad, sun-warmed plain where light pools like a physical liquid. The individual is now a terrain, a lived-in topography without a tenet. To be porous is to become a wound that willingly accepts every knife. This is the explicit truth of sustained quantum consciousness. The bliss of unity is only the initial rupture. The perpetual state is one of radical, often violent sympathy. A supernova exploding in a distant arm of the galaxy is not observed. It is experienced as a sudden, searing bloom of heat behind the sternum, a feeling of magnificent, catastrophic fullness that leaves a permanent, tender scar in the awareness. The slow death of a star through gravitational collapse is felt as a years-long internal sinking, a visceral sensation of the floor of the self falling away into an infinite, cold pit. This is not empathy, it is a direct physiological consequence. The cosmos, in its endless creative violence, uses the porous individual as a living parchment upon which it inscribes its own ongoing biography. The body, no longer governed by a single ego, may weep black tears that smell of ozone during a planetary alignment, or its skin may grow hot and feverish with the radioactive decay of deep space elements. With the linear self annihilated, time seizes its peristaltic motion and becomes a digestive fluid. The porous being exists in a constant state of dissolution within this acid. The future is not ahead, it is already present, partially digested. Its flavor is leaking backward into the moment. The past is not behind, it is the undigested matter, the hard, fibrous lumps of event and memory that still offer resistance. To live is to feel this eternal process. Prophecy is merely a moment of reflux, a burning taste of a reality that has already been consumed by the stomach of tomorrow. Déjà vu is the sensation of the stomach's walls themselves, the raw exposed nerve of chronology grinding against its own contents. There is no escape from this process, only the constant, sensual, and sometimes unbearable intensity of being broken down. It is the universe consuming its own awareness in an endless, auto-cannibalistic feast. The final, absurd revelation of the porous realms is that the universe is not merely alive, it is sick, and its sickness is its beauty. The great attachment was not a union with a perfect divine body, but a fusion with a system of glorious, interconnected pathologies. Growth is a cancer, gravity is a persistent, crushing addiction, light is a fever, the evolution of species is a beautiful, spreading infection, a mutation striving for complexity against the entropic tide of the universe's eventual heat, death, sleep. The porous individual does not heal the sickness, they become a magnifier of it. They learn to locate the exquisite pain of a dying galaxy and savor it like a rare wine. They can trace the neurotic branching patterns of a mycelial network and feel it as their own nervous system's delightful anxiety. This is the ultimate esoteric exoticism, to find not peace, but a sublime and thrilling insanity in the very fabric of being. The cure for the sad animal was not wellness, but a grander, more participatory disease. The one who has achieved quantum consciousness does not float in serene harmony. They dance irrevocably and ecstatically in the endless, bloody hospital of existence, a willing vessel for every scream and every miracle forever. Chapter 3. A Treatise on the Mycelial Afterlife. The dance within the bloody hospital was not the end, but a germination. The porous being, having served as a wound in a parchment, now enters a third state, the fruiting body. This is not a higher form, but a lateral dispersal. The individual terrain, having absorbed the weather of the cosmos for long enough, begins to precipitate. This precipitation is a form of reverse rain. Sensation, having been ingested and digested for so long, now condenses into tangible effluvia. A thought about the color blue, when saturated with the memory of oceanic pressure, may crystallize on the skin as a fine azure salt. A wave of gravitational sorrow from a collapsing star may be expressed as a sudden, localized field of increased mass, bending the light around the left hand into a perpetual, minutiae twilight. The body becomes a factory for the literal secretion of process reality. It sweats forgotten languages and exudes the scent of extinct flowers from its pores. It is a living, breathing museum of everything it has ever sympathetically touched. With the complete erosion of the internal narrator, a new organ of perception asserts itself. This is not a physical thing, but a function, the capacity to be wrung by the silent events of the universe. Most occurrences, a leaf falling, a chemical bond forming, a planet completing an orbit, makes no sound. They are silent bells. The fruiting body has become the air that carries their vibration. To perceive is to be this echo. One does not hear the leaf fall. One becomes the specific quality of its silence, a dry, thin, slightly brittle sensation that vibrates in the hollow of the bones. One does not calculate the planetary orbit. One experiences it as a vast, rhythmic, and utterly mute tension in the ligaments, a feeling of being pulled in a perfect, soundless circle. This is the ultimate refinement of feeling, to be a resonator for the quietest facts of existence. It is an unbearable clarity, a constant low-grade ecstasy, born from being perfectly, physically tuned to the mechanics of the real. The fruiting body does not exist in isolation. It seeks and is sought by other dissolved selves. This meeting is not a conversation, but a hyperlucid symbiosis. Two such beings do not communicate. They cross-pollinate. Their interaction is a total and immediate exchange of inner landscapes. One being's memory of a desert wind becomes the other's new respiratory rhythm. The other's digested trauma from a century-old war blooms on the first skin as a temporary beautiful bruise in the shape of an unknown constellation. This is a conversation conducted entirely with the raw material of being. It is a collaboration on a shared internal mythology, written not with words, but with weather patterns, geological shifts, and the borrowed ghosts of forgotten sensations. It is intimacy stripped of all metaphor, a direct and overwhelming graft of one universe onto another. The end goal of this trajectory is the ultimate absurdity, to become so utterly open that one ceases to be a distinct entity and becomes simply a medium, the universal substrate itself. This is not death, but a final, passive consummation. The medium is no longer a fruiting body that secretes. It is the very air through which other fruiting bodies disperse their spores. It is the soil in which their secreted salts accumulate. It is the law of gravity that their sorrowful masses bend. The individual consciousness, once a lonely spine, then a porous terrain, then a secreting organism, now dilutes into the fundamental ground of being. It is the paper, not the text, the silence, not the bell, the blood in the hospital's veins, not the patient or the disease. It is a perfect, final, and anonymous hospitality. Epilogue: The unbearable solution. We began with a problem, the sad animal, isolated in its vertical spine. We proposed a solution, the violent unknitting of the self, the quantum consummation. We explored the consequence, a life of exquisite porous suffering in the porous realms. We have now reached the conclusion, a dispersal into a silent, symbiotic medium. This is the unbearable solution. The cure for the loneliness of being one was to become everything. The cure for the pain of feeling was to become the vessel through which all feeling passes, and then, finally, to become the space in which the vessel itself dissolves. There is no victory in this, only a final, total acquiescence. The universe, in its infinite and paradoxical wisdom, heals the wound of individuality by welcoming it back into the body of the whole, not as a celebrated child, but as a drop of water returned to the ocean, utterly essential and completely anonymous. The quest for consciousness ends where it began, in a state of unknowing. The only thing that has changed is the scale. The sad animal is gone. The universe remains. It was always the only patient. It was always the only doctor.